In 1868, I, Mason Reed, saw hell on earth. Not on the battlefields of Gettysburg where I'd fought, but right there in Redemption Creek, Texas. The sun hung like a copper penny in a dust-choked sky as I rode into town for supplies. I wasn't looking for trouble. 7 years alone on Circle R Ranch had taught me the value of keeping my head down. But fate doesn't care what you're looking for. She was standing on a wagon like livestock, head covered with a burlap sack, feet bleeding into the splintered wood, hands bound before her, and they were bidding on her like it was sport. $1, a fat man yelled, laughter thick in his throat. A real savage, yours forever. The crowd roared. Old men with sunburnt necks and whiskey breath, young fools with dust in their boots and emptiness in their eyes. My Colt 1860 Army 44 hung heavy at my hip, the same gun that had followed me through the bloody fields of Pennsylvania. My fingers brushed the worn wooden grip, a habit from darker days. I should have walked away. That's what men like me do. Keep our heads down, let the world rot. But then the woman stumbled, just once, like her knees gave out from the shame. Catherine would have known what to do. My wife, 7 years in the cold ground. Her last words still burning in my ears. Promise me, Mason, don't let your heart die with me. The fever took her fast, left me with 40 acres, 30 head of longhorn, and a silence that never ended. Something broke inside me then. I stepped forward through the crowd, hand resting on my gun. I'll give you $1, I said, voice flat as prairie land. The crowd fell silent, like I'd slapped every last one of them. Someone whispered, "That's the lonely Reed from Circle R." The seller, a man with a jagged scar running from eye to jaw, smirked at me. I recognized him then, though I couldn't place from where. Something in his eyes sparked a memory, dark and bloody. "You sure you want to bring trouble home, Reed?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. "Trouble and I are old friends," I replied, pulling a silver dollar from my pocket. $1. Take it or leave it." He snatched the coin, laughed, and shoved the woman toward me. "Sold to the lonely farmer." The crowd dispersed, entertainment over, but the scarred man's eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. I climbed onto that wagon, knife in hand. As I cut her ropes, I noticed burn marks on her wrists, the kind Comanche warriors carried after their coming-of-age rituals. This was no ordinary captive. When I lifted that filthy sack, I expected a broken spirit. What I found were eyes like amber coals, defiant, fierce, unbroken. She stood tall despite her wounds, shoulders squared, not afraid, not yielding. As we turned to leave, the scarred man called out, "Hey, Reed, I know you. Gettysburg, wasn't it? 20th of Pennsylvania?" I froze, slowly turning back. "You don't know anything about me." He smiled, cold as a rattlesnake. "We'll be seeing each other real soon, Sergeant Reed." Ice settled in my gut. How did he know? Who was he? The questions followed us all the way back to Circle R, along with the woman who walked barefoot behind my horse, never once complaining, never once speaking. By the time we reached the ranch, dusk had fallen. The place looked smaller than usual, almost ashamed of itself. I felt that too. I took an old army blanket and laid it in the small barn. "You can stay here," I said, pointing to the shelter. "No one will harm you here." She gave no sign she'd heard, but her eyes followed me as I walked away. Those eyes would haunt my dreams at night. I'd grown accustomed to silence after 7 years alone, but the silence of this woman was different. It had weight, presence. For 3 days, neither of us spoke a word. I left food on the porch each morning: cornbread, coffee, dried beef. By noon, the plate was always empty. On the 4th day, I noticed the gate latch had been fixed. Better than I'd ever done it. The next day, my torn shirt was mended, Stitches so fine they might have been done in a fancy Boston shop. I started talking then, not to her exactly, just out loud, about the cattle, the weather, the ache in my knee that never quite left after Gettysburg. No answers came, but I could feel her listening. At night, I'd pull out my war chest from beneath the floorboards, medals, letters, in a faded photograph of my unit. 20 men, only 7 came home. And as I stared at those faces, one caught my eye, younger, unscarred, but unmistakable. Daniel Bishop, the man who'd sold her. Memories flooded back. Not just any soldier, but Lieutenant Jake Bishop's brother. My brother! You let him die! All of you! Daniel had screamed during the battle. The truth was darker. Daniel had betrayed our position to Confederate forces, leading to an ambush that killed 8 men, including his own brother. He disappeared after, presumed dead or deserted. Now he called himself Garrett, a bounty hunter with a taste for Comanche blood. The next morning I found boot prints around the property that weren't mine. Someone was watching. I checked my Henry rifle, counted the 16 rounds in the tube, and placed it by the door. The Colt stayed on my hip. That night I slept with one eye open, listening for hoof beats that didn't come. Storm's coming, I said to no one the next afternoon, watching thunderheads build over the western horizon. Bad one. Clouds rolled black as cannon smoke. Wind picked up like the devil's own breath. I rushed to get the cattle into the barn, securing windows and doors with the efficiency military life teaches a man. That's when I saw her, standing in the open, staring up at the sky like it was an old enemy. Get inside, I called over the howling wind. Storm's coming. She didn't move, not until lightning cracked close enough to raise the hair on my arms. I ran to her, grabbed her hand, and pulled her toward the cabin. We crashed through the door as the heavens opened, rain lashing the windows like gunfire. We stood there soaked to the bone, hearts pounding in the sudden quiet of the cabin. And that's when I saw it, a flicker of fear in those amber eyes. Not fear of me, not even of the storm, but something deeper, older. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was remembering. After that stormy night, something shifted between us. Not with words, not with promises, but with presence. She began sitting on the edge of the porch steps during evenings, not close, but not hiding anymore either. One morning I found a drawing in the dirt near the water pump, a prairie flower delicately rendered. That night I pulled out one of Catherine's old botany books, flipping through yellowed pages until I found it on page 47. Elara, in Comanche, meaning eternal bloom, a symbol of strength and resilience. The next morning as I set down her breakfast, I said it softly, Elara. She didn't flinch, didn't look at me, but her eyes lingered a moment longer, her shoulders less tense than before. We continued our silent dance for another week, until one evening, as I was mending a fence, a voice soft as prairie wind spoke. Mason. I dropped my hammer, turned to find her standing there. 7 years since anyone's called my name, I said, the words catching in my throat. That night, I found a Comanche arrow embedded in the barn door, a warning sign. When Elara saw it, her eyes widened, and for the first time, she spoke a complete sentence. They have found me. Who? Your tribe? I asked. She shook her head. The killer of my tribe, the man who sold me. He killed my father, the chief. Garrett Bishop, I said, the name bitter on my tongue. So he hunts Comanche. I handed her a small hunting knife. Do you know how to use this? Elara took the blade, turning it in her hand with practiced ease. I am the daughter of a Comanche chief. I knew how to kill before I knew how to speak. I knew they would come. Not a question of if, but when. I prepared the ranch as best I could, setting tripwires around the perimeter, positioning the furniture for cover, cleaning both my Henry rifle and Colt revolver until they gleamed. In the evenings, I read to Elara from Catherine's books, stumbling over words by lamplight. Sometimes she'd correct my pronunciation of Comanche terms, a ghost of a smile on her lips. We were building something, slow and honest. One quiet evening, as I sharpened my knife by the barn, Elara walked over and gently placed her hand on mine. She didn't say a thing. She didn't have to. It was the first time in 7 years I didn't feel like a man just surviving. The dog's barking woke me at dawn. I knew before I looked, dust on the horizon. Riders coming fast. Elara, get inside the house. Lock the door, I said, reaching for my rifle. How many? She asked, already moving. 4 riders. One is Garrett. Others from town, she replied, eyes narrowing as she peered into the distance. I checked my weapons one last time. Nobody dies in my house today. Garrett led the men into my yard, calling out, Reed, I know you're in there. Bring out the savage. I stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. This is private property, Bishop. Garrett grinned. So you remember me, Sergeant Reed of the 20th of Pennsylvania. What do you want? I asked, though I already knew. You let Jake die, Reed. My brother. You were his sergeant. You were supposed to protect him. Jake died because you led Confederate troops to our position, I said, the old anger rising. You betrayed all of us. Garrett drew his gun. You took my family. Now I'll take everything you have. The first shot splintered the wood by my head. I fired back, catching one of his men in the shoulder, then ducked inside as bullets shattered my windows. I reloaded, using the corner of the house as cover, but they had us surrounded. One man set fire to the barn. A bullet grazed my arm as I moved between windows, trying to keep them at bay. But they were closing in. Garrett crashed through the back door, gun aimed at my chest. Hello, Sergeant. No escape this time. As he cocked his pistol, an arrow suddenly protruded from his shoulder. He howled in pain, spinning around to face the new threat. Elara stood in the doorway, but not as I'd known her. She wore strips of leather tied around her arms, red clay streaked across her cheeks in traditional Comanche war paint. No longer the silent woman from the wagon. This was a warrior, a chief's daughter with my hunting knife in one hand and fierce determination in her eyes. She spoke in Comanche, then switched to English. My father cursed your soul. Today I will release it to the dead. What followed was chaos, gunfire, shouting, the crackle of flames. I shot one man as he came through the window. Elara engaged Garrett directly, her movements quick as a cougar's. The remaining townsmen fled, leaving his companions to their fate. Garrett and I ended up face to face when both our guns emptied. We fought with fists and hatred, years of buried rage exploding between us. He was younger, stronger, but I had more to lose. He slammed me against the wall, hands closing around my throat. You should have died at Gettysburg, he snarled. My vision darkened at the edges. Then suddenly, Garrett's eyes widened in shock. He looked down at the knife protruding from his back. Elara's knife. I pushed him off, watching him slump to the floor. Gettysburg is over, Bishop. The war is over. Never over, Reed, he whispered as the light left his eyes. Never. Elara and I stood amid the ruins of my ranch, barns smoldering, windows shattered, blood soaking into floorboards that had known too much silence. I choose to stay here, she said, her voice stronger now. This is my home. I nodded, understanding everything she wasn't saying. We'll rebuild. Together. 1 year later, Circle R Ranch had transformed. A new barn stood where the old one had burned. Elara's garden flourished, prairie flowers and vegetables growing side by side. The silence was gone, replaced by something better. Purpose. I stood on the porch watching Elara teach a young orphan girl from town how to plant Elara flowers. The child had come to us after her parents died of fever, another soul finding refuge at Circle R. I'd seen hell on earth, but I'd also found heaven in the place I least expected. On this wild land, with a woman who taught me that true strength isn't surviving war, but daring to begin again after everything is lost. In the distance, I spotted a group of Comanche riders on the horizon, Elara's people, coming to trade as they did now each month. Not all wounds heal clean, but they do heal. Perhaps the past never truly leaves us, but that doesn't mean we can't write a new future. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own battles fought and survived, remember that even the most hardened hearts can find peace. And if you want to hear what happens when the Comanche riders bring news that will change Mason and Elara's lives forever, subscribe now for the next chapter in the Wild Souls series.